So, welcome to Rethinking Change, using diffusion to change behavior. So, this is a new concept for change management, uh, and I'll get into how it differs from the traditional change that we've all come to know over time, over the past 30 years, given that Harvard Business School led the path for change management from Dr. Kurt Lewin to Kubler Ross and to Cotter. These concepts have were born from the Harvard Business School, and it led the way for over 30 years, particularly in the during the industrial age. Given that we're in the information age today, things are more agile, things are more flexible, things move faster. So we have to figure out a better approach to mobilize people within a changing environment in order for them to be more effective in moving people towards the desired behavior in an organization to maximize change management. So I'm Dr. Mario Wallace, with the founder of All Things Strategic. I've worked on over 20 change management initiatives over time. And this is from small change projects that consist of less than 50 people to large change projects that consisted of over 50,000 people. So I have a lot of experience in managing change initiatives, and I understand from each methodology, from Lewin's methodology, Dr. Kurt Lewin's methodology, all the way to the concept that most people use today is ProSci. And ProSci is basically a iteration of all the change methods that came before it, but it mostly emphasizes on Cotter's method of change management. Basically, it is designed to um, operationalize Cotter's change method of change. First thing I want to talk about is Black Business Professional Coaching Program. This is just a quick uh, promotion. So I work with Black business professionals in corporate to help them understand the principles of strategic impact as it relates to the organization, exploring theories related to strategic impact. And that is most of the theories that's published today, to break those theories down to help you understand what they are and how you can use them to leverage your professionalism in this hyper competitive or hyper political climate we're living in today, how to apply those principles and how to become a strategic impact Black professional. So I will leave my on the last slide, you will see my email. So to contact me, please refer to the email and we can have a conversation about this program. So what are the learning objectives? So today we want to discuss the different models used in change management, explore the foundational principles and behaviors of a complex adaptive system, explain the fundamentals of network science, identify and analyze patterns of communication and their impact on efficiency, collaboration, outcomes in adaptive systems, differentiate strong and weak ties, narrow and wide bridges, and discuss the concept of diffusion. So what is change management? So change management is, according to ProSci, an organization that leads this concept of change today, given that most organizations seeks to send their staff, particularly people in organizational development, to gain a ProSci certification. So according to ProSci, it's a structured approach to transitioning individuals, teams, and organizations from one current state to a desired future state based on specific outcomes in the organization. It emphasizes that effective change management is about addressing the people side, not the technical side, not the process side, but the people. The difference between the technical process and the people is people have emotions, people have feelings, and people have desires. The technical side is just technologies, and the process side is just processes. Those are non-human factors. such as the things that we manage as a project manager. We're basically managing the technical side and the process side. When there is a change manager present, he or she must manage the people side. So he is dealing with people emotions, which are all over the place when it comes to a new change initiative, because a change initiative is introduced to the people by senior leaders, which totally change um, their approach to the work that they're doing, which give them a sense of anxiety. And what we have to do as change managers is to help manage the people through those anxieties to get them to a desired future state to help the organization reach its goals. So today, when we think of all the foundational change models and uh, frameworks, we have Cotter's 8 steps to change, which has existed for over 30, 35 years, which the first step is to create a sense of urgency. If there is no urgency in your organization, but leaders think that they need to move towards this new technology implementation, leaders will create a sense of urgency within the organization to get people to uh, understand the importance of making a change. Then you have uh, Kubler-Lee Ross's grief cycle. Basically, uh, Dr. Ross states that people go through phases when they go through change initiatives, starting with denial, going from denial to anger, and then they begin to bargain. Why are we doing this? Then they go through a depression, because if a person in an organization uh, were a high performer using some type of technology, and you take that technology away and you introduce a new technology, that person becomes equal to everybody else, and he or she is not a high performer anymore. And they give that person a sense of loss, a sense of depression. So they go through this grief cycle, and the goal is to, as you dip into anger and bargain, though, according to Dr. Ross, those are the phases in which the organization began to lose money. But as it increases back towards the top to depression and acceptance, that means that we've exceeded our normal production within an organization, and we're heading toward the goals that we expect, and that is related to acceptance. Then we have the ADKAR model, which comes from ProSci, meaning that there are 5 barriers to change. One is awareness, the other one is desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And the goal is, if a person scores, so the ADKAR model has a scoring, a 1 to 5 scoring Likert scale. And if a person, and this is more of an assessment type tool, more of a questionnaire, you administer it to the people who are impacted by the change, and the groups that score less than 3 within either the ADKAR. If it's less than 3, that's an area that the organization needs to focus on in order to drive change in the organization. So, for instance, if there is a less than 3 score on knowledge, that means that the technology or the process or the procedure that we're trying to introduce, the people don't truly understand it. That means we need to take them back through some type of training to help them understand it. If they score less than 3 on desire, that means that most of the people don't desire to change, and we have to help them understand what's in it for them to increase that score beyond 3. Once we get all the scores above 3, then we will start to see people mobilizing the organization to help move the change forward. And lastly, Lewin's change management template. Lewin came up with this concept, and it's Dr. Kurt Lewin, that is unfreeze, change, and refreeze, right? So basically, you unfreeze an organization based on how they used to do things. You take them through a change process. And once you get the people, a majority of the people participating, like anything beyond 65 or 70% of the people participating in the change, where you see the behavioral changes, then you refreeze it, meaning you lock it in, you write policies, that stipulate that this is the new change environment and we need everybody to continue to function in this environment. If you're not functioning in this new environment, then we need to start thinking about attrition and things like that within the organization, because we don't want people drilling holes in the boat as we're trying to sail, or or in a ship or boat as we're trying to sail it across the waters. All of these change methods that I just shared with you are traditional top-down change approaches, meaning the leaders at the top of the organization determine the changes that needs to occur in an organization. And it should happen this way all the time, right? These are executive leaders who are hired to make key decisions to move an organization so that the organization can be competitive in the market. But in this top-down approach, the CEO and the C-suite, they determine new initiatives, new change initiatives, new technologies that needs to be implemented in the organization. They implement them they share them with the director level leaders. On this particular screen, we have accounting, human resources, and operations. And those director level leaders pushes it down further to the people in the organization. Now, the people who are impacted by the change are the first tier of people, or we can say third tier of people. And those are frontline workers. As you can see here, all of them operate in different groups. Thus, all of them operate in silos. When I say silos, what I mean is that they are independently focused with little to no communication across those silos. Now, there may be people who know each other, like friends and families who are within other divisions and other departments, yes. But when it comes to how we mobilize people in a changing environment, they have little interaction and little say-so on how to help move the change forward. So in a top-down siloed environment, communication is very slow, right? Information comes from the top and it goes to the bottom, and information comes from the bottom back to the top. That means it goes from the frontline people to the director level people to the C-suite team, and then to the CEO who makes a final decision. This process is very, very methodical and very, very slow, which it extends the length of the change initiative like drastically. There has to be some type of mobilization and faster pace and acceleration within this top-down change model in order for it to be more effective. Thus, we have what we call the agile diffusion method, right? Same concept, but what we understand is that communication is not top-down and it's not bottom-up. Communication is cyclical, right? At the bottom where you see the dots, and the larger dots and the lines and the bridges, just think of the dots as people. The larger dot in the center is what we call a hub, who is the key figure who people trust for their information. And think of the lines as the connection between who communicate with each other. And think of the lines that connects from one circle to the next circle as a bridge, meaning this person, if you can see my cursor, this person here knows someone in this particular circle of what we call a cluster, and this person knows someone here. So if I want to share information from this person, this center of trust, this hub, then I can share it with this person to get it over to here, right? And if I want to share information back, I can share it to this person to get it here, and then from this person to get it there, meaning we're sharing information across departments, across clusters, which accelerates change from diffusing information in a more cyclical way than in a more top-down way. Thus, in this agile environment, change is accelerated, behavior change is faster because we trust that the people at the front line, well, basically, we tend to empower people at the frontline level of an organization to drive change instead of it just being from top down. So let's talk about this for a second. So organization work in a top-down fashion. At the top, you see, just look at the top of the screen, the first blue arrow at the top, you see nodes. These are C-suite leaders. These are people in position. This is more of a hierarchical way that things happen in normal organizations. But here's the thing. Information flows from the top to the people. These are people here. All these dots are people. And then these bridges link one person to another group of people. So people, we say people, when change happens, people self-organize into certain groups of people. They self-organize intentionally, right? They tend to identify with someone who they trust that knows how to be more effective in the new changing environment. This is a natural order, how people do. This is not forced. This is just naturally. So people tend to self-organize according to new changing environments. And they group together and they cluster together within people who they feel are trustworthy and who can help them gain a sense of what the change is so they can be more effective in that changing environment. So information comes from the top. When it drops into this semi-permeable boundary of people, this is the organization. These are different departments. People self-organize. They self-organize into different groups. And those groups of people who self-organize may not be from the same department. They may be from multiple different departments, but they have a center of trust in which how they self-organize. And then they bridge from one department to the next, meaning Richard knows someone in this department named Curtis. So Richard and Curtis consistently communicate about what's happening with the change in the organization. So what happens within, this is considered a social network environment or network science environment, how people tend to network within a changing environment. And this whole thing is considered what we call a complex adaptive system or systems, meaning large organizations like, think of healthcare for a second. So you have healthcare, you have all of these different clinical areas within healthcare. All of those areas have their own discipline, their own research, their own practice, their own procedures, but all of them make up one complex system in which they come together to provide the best healthcare outcome for the patient, but they work independently, right? And interdisciplinary and in an interdisciplinary environment. So these are highly complex systems. So we have to figure out how to effectively mobilize change or change initiative in these complex environments. And we do it by understanding and studying what is a complex adaptive system and what is network science. So as things change in the complex adaptive world, there's certain things that take place. One is emergence. And most people who are researchers understand what emergence is. As things self-organize and people work together and people cluster into these small circles of trust. And within those small circles, people begin to find workarounds and new ways of doing things that make the change easier. But most of the time, within those small groups and those small clusters, the executive leaders don't pay attention to what people are saying and doing at the frontline level. In a complex adaptive world, we pay attention to what people are doing at the frontline level because that's where the new behaviors begin to be born, and that's where emergence begin to happen. So one part of complex adaptive system is understanding that emergence will take place. The second thing is understanding that people interact based on conditional interactions, right? These are not forced interactions. People self-organize based on the conditions that they have with other people, right? We tend to befriend people based on certain conditions, right? Certain social groups tend to connect and befriend each other based on some similarities, certain goals, and certain morals, ethics, and standards that they have that makes them similar. So in an organization that's very complex, people conditionally interact. When you think of top-down leadership, we expect for the frontline workers to get their information from their supervisor. Uh, and what we don't uh, think of or consider is how sociable is the supervisor with his or her direct reports, right? In a complex adaptive system, what we understand is that people may not necessarily go to the supervisor for information, but they may go to a friend who they trust the most for that information, and they may trust the information that comes from the friend rather than the supervisor. Thus, we tend to put a spotlight on how people work in a network. The last thing is we understand that people are semi-autonomous agents in organizations, right? They are independent in their thinking, but they're collectively a part of a whole system. But even though they are collectively a part of a whole system and we want them to function within the system uh, as the system dictates, we have to still understand that they are semi-autonomous. They make their own decisions and they can agree to participate or they can disagree to participate. Thus, we have to figure out how to keep them agreeing to the new changes. And I explain it as we go through. We talked about these particular dots, where this is a hub and these are nodes or people, and people tend to self-organize based on conditional interaction around a key figure. And this key figure is termed in network science as the hub, the most trusted person. So if you think of all of these people here, the hub is the person in the center. That means that these three people on this side and these two people on this side tend to go to her for information regarding the new change in environment. So how do we get to this point? Again, when a new change happens, people self-organize based on conditional interaction, and that self-organization creates a cluster. This is a cluster. And the people within the cluster gets information from the hub. And the hub is the strongest person, meaning the hub is more trustworthy than going to the supervisor. Going to the hub for information is a better option for the people within the organization who's seeking to change. Thus, the supervisor needs to understand this instead of going to everybody within the organization. Certain supervisors need to go to the hubs, communicate with the hubs, and the hubs will diffuse the information out to the people within the clusters. So, what is network sciences? So, network sciences consist of it's studying networks, whether it's computer science, understand how computers communicate with each other, uh, biology, understanding how different organs communicate with each other, and understanding social networks, how people communicate with each other. But to understand network sciences, you have to understand the terms and the components of it. Nodes are, represent individuals or elements, or from a social network science, individual people. The lines represent the how people are connected to each other, those lines that connect people. Hubs is the highly connected nodes, the one that's the central point of the node, who people trust the most. And bridges are things that connect one node to one cluster to the other cluster of people. So this is what it looks like. right? We have nodes, we have hubs at the bottom, or we have one, two, three, four hubs. So if I was talking to you and we were discussing um, who are the key influences within your organization, and you've conducted a social network mapping activity, uh, then you would be able to communicate with me with there's four hubs, because we need to talk to those hubs and mobilize those hubs to get us what we need to be more effective, to help to diffuse the change within the organization. We have bridges, and we have what we call a cluster. So people self-organize, which creates a cluster, and they self-organize around a hub. And we have to understand how many clusters is within a social network, how many bridges are within a social network, and how many um, and how people communicate across a social network. So this particular slide explains to us what they are from a network sciences perspective, but let's go a little deeper. So within network sciences, you have weak ties and strong ties. And I'll show you more of a visual example on the next screen. So weak ties are infrequent or less intense connection, meaning weak ties for you all on the call, it's people in close proximity in your close your uh well, let me that's the opposite. I'm speaking about strong ties. Well, weak ties are people who you talk with infrequently, right? You have a friend who lives in Dallas, Texas, and you talk to her or him every so often, but he's still a friend. But he's not someone who you go to every other day or every day to share information with, to debate and to discuss information. That's a friend who is a part of a strong tie. Strong tie friends tend to talk more often, more consistently. They debate information, and they are influenced by the closeness of their friendship. As they debate that information, their friends can influence them to agree or disagree to certain information that's being presented, such as a political party. A friend or friends who are in close ties, can persuade easily, or than someone who's a weak tie, can persuade a friend to buy into a new social construct, right? A new social party, than someone who is a weak tie. So a weak tie link is closely related to a bridge that bridges one group of people to the next. A strong tie are those closely knitted connections within an organization, which help to drive change more effectively. So, and I'll get into this in detail into a different slide, but I'm just going to say this for now. When you have groups of strong ties, those groups tend to be more effective in changing the behavior of people. Weak tie groups seems, according to research, to be less effective in influencing and changing behaviors in an organization. And I explain that more in detail. So then we have narrow bridges and wide bridges. So a strong tie and a weak tie, they are connected by bridges. Okay. A strong tie is connected by a narrow bridge because the person is right there next to each other. They're close proximity. And though in the bridges are the lines on how communication flows in the organization. A wide bridge is more of connecting one cluster to the next. So one person from this group to someone in the next group is considered a wide bridge. And because of the bridge is so wide, um, those bridges tend to have uh, uh, a lesser impact on changing uh, behavior in an organization. So let's look at it in a more visual graphic. So if you can see my cursor here, we talked about Narrow bridges. This is a narrow bridge. This narrow bridge connects this person to that person. So information goes between these two people. This person here don't necessarily talk to that person. There is no bridge. And this person here does not necessarily talk to this person or this person. The conversation is back and forth between these two people based on a narrow bridge. A wide bridge connects this person to this person. But remember, this cluster of people, they all live within a strong tie relationship. And they're connected by narrow bridges. And these group of people are more successful in changing behavior of people within their clusters. This person is lesser or is not as successful if he's trying to change the behavior of people within this cluster because he's not a part of that cluster. But when it comes to agile, well, not agile, when it comes to network science, social network sciences, we have to figure out how do we strengthen and how do we create the right bridges to foster behavior change across the entire organization. And this is what I'm trying to get to here. So weak acquaintances like this person and that person bridges new information, but they're not effective in changing behavior. So let me explain. A weak tie is someone outside of your circle that consistently bring new information into your circle or your cluster of people. You want both weak ties and strong ties because with a weak tie, it brings, new information is fed into your cluster that can lead to some type of innovation. Your cluster of friends, for example, let's say Southside High School, and there's a group of cheerleaders from Southside High School. And this group of cheerleaders or football players, they argued and debated over information consistently over time. And they've consistently did these same plays in football and these same routines as cheerleaders. But when a new person comes from north side to the south side, a new cheerleader or a new player, football or basketball player, and brings new skills and new plays and new routines, it seems to challenge the status quo within the strong tie group of people. And if they begin to listen to the wide bridge or the new acquaintance that's not a part of their circle, then they begin to adapt new innovative cheerleader routines and new innovative plays for the football team that leads to a different outcome for the season and for the year. So new innovative concepts come from outside the circle. So you have to leave space for weak ties to take place to bring in new information. And that is one of the approaches on how we influence change. We have to allow weak ties or weak acquaintances to communicate new information within clusters that helps us to create more innovation or mobilize change to be more effective in the organization. So how do we do it? There's a concept called artificial bridges, and this is a construct that I use to extend this gentleman named Dr. Davis and Toller's methodology of wide bridges to say, if we intentionally, based on the social dynamics within an organization in the areas that are not connected, if we intentionally find how to strengthen the ties or networks within an organization, that is a change agent, an executive, or project manager, someone working together, looking at the outcome of a social network mapping activity and seeing the existence of how people are connected within the organization. So think of it. This is how people are connected within the organization. And if we look at it closely, there's a lot of gaps, especially if we go over to this cluster here. A lot of these people are not connected. So strategically, artificial bridges is an agenda-driven construct that seeks ways to strengthen communication within an organization by strengthening the wide bridges and narrow bridges and connecting the people to make information and behavior change accelerates. So basically, we look at a social network construct and we make connections that can accelerate the speed of change. And we'll get to that more in detail too. So this is the introduction of artificial bridges which is a diffusion method used to accelerate change. So social network mapping. So what is that? Because it has to be connected to what we're talking about. So it's basically a method of visualizing and analyzing relationships and interaction within groups, organizations, and communities. It's basically an assessment that's done that asks people a series of questions. And some of the questions are, who do you get your information from the most? Who do you trust in the organization, right? Who do you frequently collaborate with when working on tasks related to change initiatives? And who do you approach when facing challenges in adapting to change, a change initiative? So this particular questionnaire uses a Likert scale for 1 to 5, and 5 is the highest score you can get, and 1 is the lowest score. So within those 1 to 5, you also have to type in the name of people according to how these questions are asked, right? Who do you approach when facing challenges? Mario. Who do you get your information from? Mostly Richard, right? You tend to add those names, and what happens is there is a more of a statistical tool that's used to analyze the responses of 500 people or 10,000 people or 50,000 people, and it create what we call a social network mapping. It create a web that leads to us understanding who is connected to who within the organization. So basically, it creates a structure like this. It tells us who's connected within an organization. After you complete that questionnaire, it will tell us exactly where the connections are within the organization. And based on us knowing what those connections are, then we can connect them. We can strengthen the ties. Here's the first. Here is applying narrow bridges and wide bridges. And here is applying artificial bridges. We have just strengthened this concept to make information flow faster within an organization. So how diffusion happen? So there's 2 ways of communication. There's 2 communication patterns in an organization as it relates to mobilizing change. One is a fireworks pattern and the other one is a fishnet pattern. What we know is that when information comes from a single source and it communicates across the organization, it is not designed to change behavior. So if I'm communicating to an organization that we are about to hire a new VP of operations, the information goes from a single source from the marketing communication department, it goes out. And it not necessarily because these people are not connected. So everybody hears the information and they share the information. Over time, the information diffuses, meaning it's just good information that we need to understand and know about. But it's not information that we use that's going to drive behavior change. To drive behavior change, there has to be some connections where information is hard to get out of the system, right? If you're trying, so you can communicate this for anything. If you're trying to communicate a new product, a new person been hired in an organization, trying to market something on social media, and you just want to communicate it out to the world, you just communicate it from a single source. You communicate it from your page, or you make a video and just communicate it out. A president of an organization is in a more trying to address the state of the address within an organization. They make a video, they explain the the new direction of the organization, they communicate it out. It's fine. It works that way. Communication can work in multiple ways. But if you're trying to change behavior in a changing environment, communication must effectively be communicated in a fishnet pattern. So we must connect the people within a fishnet pattern and communicate information inside of a fishnet pattern, which creates what we call redundancy of information. Meaning, if I communicate it to Mario, he communicates it to Dedrick. Dedrick communicates it to Deidre. Deidre communicates it to LaShannon. And then LaShannon communicates the same information that Mario shared with Dedrick back to Mario. And if Mario disagrees with information, it keeps looping back around to him and it's forced him to take a deeper look at that information and debate that information with LaShannon or debate it back to Dedrick. And over time, because we are in a close, strong tie, narrow bridged situation, there is an opportunity of that the redundancy changes Mario's position on a matter, changes Mario's philosophy towards a subject, changes Mario's approach to information that he's hearing, right? So the goal is, how do we create in a changing environment a fishnet pattern structure to effectively communicate, spread, and diffuse information? The problem that we're having today with most change initiatives, they're communicated this way. Top-down leadership is communicated from the executive leadership team through the marketing department, and it's communicated out, such as an initiative like Workday or SAP or whatever big technology or process and procedures that we're trying to communicate. We're always communicating it from a single source, such as marketing and communication that comes from the director C-suite team. That way of communication is ineffective if you're seeking to mobilize change and change behavior within an organization. You have to set in place the structure and foundation before you can effectively communicate a message out that leads to behavior change. So what does it look like? So narrow bridges and strong ties. Remember, strong ties are within a cluster. And narrow bridges are the connection of people, how communication is disseminated within a cluster, not from one cluster to the next cluster, but only within the cluster. So if we have gaps in our cluster, like this is a gap here, this is a gap here, this is a gap here, this is a gap. There's 3 gaps here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gaps here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 gaps there. Within a narrow bridge, strong tie concept, this is what it looks like. But if we want new information going inside the clusters, then we must create wider bridges. So now we need to connect people from one cluster to the next cluster, because now we're really trying to mobilize and diffuse information and spread information. We're really trying to create new innovation within the organization. But here's the thing. These are natural occurrences, right? It's at the bottom, organic bridging and organic bridging, meaning this is the output of a social network mapping activity in which we collected data, and this is the result, right? So this is us looking at the results of a social network mapping, how people are connected organically. These people self-organized organically, and they made relationships with people. They befriended people in organization because of their they organically became friends from whatever means that they use to become friends within the organization, but it wasn't a forced relationship. So this is just an output. Now, diffusion of information using the fishnet pattern and artificial bridging looks like this. So basically, we studied the network, we conducted a social mapping activity. And based on the results that we saw within the organization, we said that we need stronger ties within this social network. So we began to study the people within the network, talk to their supervisors, talk to their directors, um, talk to some the nodes. Remember, the nodes are the central person within the network, within the cluster. And we gathered information and we asked questions like, who do you think you need to be connected within your cluster to accelerate information? And based on those conversations, we began to draw the different lines. And what we did based on an agenda, because remember, artificial bridging is an agenda-driven concept. We began to have certain people who did not necessarily communicate with each other. We began to start meeting with them and introducing them to each other and share with them that we need them to communicate more often based on the changes that's taking place. And this application helps to accelerate change and helps to change behavior in an organization. So we're looking at a social network mapping, looking across a big organization. This is what it looks like. There's going to be 30, 40 clusters across an organization. There will be hubs within each cluster. There will be people within each cluster. And each cluster is a what we call a community of trust. It's a cluster, yeah, because remember now, people self-organize and people gather together based on conditional interactions, but we call those communities of trust because people tend to organize according to people they trust. Within that trusting cluster, we have to figure out, are the ties strong enough? And if they're not strong enough, or are the bridges strong enough? And if they're not, we have to create more bridges. We have to create more ties to drive, to accelerate change, to drive behavior change. Now, if I'm looking at a social network mapping activity, these particular lines were already there. I administered a social network mapping activity. I got the results. This is the results I'm looking at. All the black lines and the black dots are already in place. They were already organically structured friendships within organizations. They gathered together based on whatever means, whatever choices, but whatever self-conditioned interaction there were. We study this network ourselves, and then we begin to create these red lines, which are called artificial bridges. And the reason why they're called artificial bridges is because they are agenda driven and they are artificially created to accelerate change in organizations. These artificial bridges would not exist if they were not created by a change leader like me or yourself to help an organization accelerate change faster. Once you create the artificial bridges, you have to create the agile mindset. And what is the agile mindset? So the hubs within each cluster, we have to pull the hubs out of each cluster. And we have to teach the hub three things. The first thing is psychological safety. We have to teach the hubs how to remove any barrier. And it's not psychological safety necessarily as it is taught as a theoretical construct today. The type of psychological safety that I refer to is the type that there are no barriers for growth in an organization, communication within an organization, learning within an organization, debating information, or challenges when you're challenging your supervisor. So basically, these 8 people have to create a psychologically safe environment within their cluster, only within their cluster, where people feel safe to share information without attack, without retaliation. Even if they are at a lower status than you, they feel safe that if you share information that they feel, uh, based on their research and their due diligence, is incorrect, they have the right to speak up, and you have the right to listen to them. So what we want, the first thing in an agile mindset, is to create a psychologically safe environment within your cluster, because you don't manage anybody, first of all. You are, based on a new change environment, people self-organize around you based on conditional interactions. So we want to empower you to empower them so that we can mobilize people within the changing environment to create behavior change or innovation. The second thing is timely feedback. We want the person in the center of the node to be able to effectively give feedback in a timely manner, right? If Jose says something about a new concept that he wants to test and try, we want you, John, number 4, to listen to Jose and give Jose feedback within a day or two. We don't need you to disregard Jose for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, because the disregarding of time of information based on a timely feedback structure does not help in developing or creating an expert of a subject. So let me explain this. Malcolm Gladwell states that an expert is created within 10,000 hours of a subject, but he's not created if the person who's working those 10,000 hours to become an expert is not receiving timely feedback. So a person can work 10,000 hours to become an expert of a subject and could be doing it wrong consistently throughout those 10,000 hours. But if that person is working directly with an expert, and as they gain those 10,000 hours, when they test new concepts, they share it with the expert say, oh, you're doing it incorrectly, try it this way. The expert keeps sharpening them over that 10,000 hours. So by the time they reach 10,000 hours, they are considered an expert because they were able to share information and to get timely feedback so they can become an expert on the subject matter. Same way with this concept here. The hub, the center of trust within a cluster, must give timely feedback to anybody within that cluster. The third thing is of the agile mindset is running sprints, testing concepts, and taking those successful sprints and creating SOPs, standard operating procedures that can be replicated. So let me explain this, the third step. The third step, which is the final step. The third step is, if, let's think of number 4 here. If this person here, Jose, brings something to run, number 4, and say, hey, I have based on this new technology that's implemented, I've been doing it this way, and I've seen a high level of success, and the success is higher than other people in my group and other people across these other clusters. Why don't we test what I'm doing amongst our team for 60 days? And if it comes back successful, meaning if the other people within the cluster scores go up from 30% to 60 or 70%, then the workaround that I came up with may increase success, which will build confidence amongst the people, which will help foster behavior change. So number 4 gives Jose timely feedback and say, let's agree, I agree. Then he shares with the other team, and for the next 60 days, they test this this sprint concept, this project, and they run the project. And in 60 days, they determine, because they have metrics to determine if it's successful or not. They say if it's successful, if is it not successful. If it's successful, they take it, they write it up as a standard operating procedure, an SOP, And number four takes it to his supervisor. They discuss it. They take it up to the C-suite. They discuss it. And they said, well, let's take it and replicate it. So number four's iterative sprint that shows success is given to group 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. And all those groups tested within their cluster. And if they see any success, all of them adopt it. And that is how you diffuse information, spread information, create innovation and behavior change within an organization. So what would it take to be special in this environment? You must understand complex adaptive systems. You must be able to apply network science. You must be able to use social network mapping, understanding bridges and ties, develop an agile mindset, and understand how to analyze different and apply different communication patterns.